On this debut episode of Season 2 of The Prediction Trade, lifelong New Yorker James Altucher shares his analysis and best bets on New York's gubernatorial and mayoral races. James offers up a surprise prediction for the gubernatorial race. We also talk about his public spats with Jerry Seinfeld, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, and some of his fellow New Yorkers.
All you false pretenders and your freaky contenders trying to be the first. In my own opinion, you am not defending. You are the worst.
Well, welcome back. It's Season 2, Episode 1 of The Prediction Trade. I'm Jeff Joseph, Editorial Director of Luckbox magazine, and I'm joined once again by Mike Reddy, the producer of the show and an editor at Luckbox magazine. Hey, Mike, it's been some time since we've done this.
That's right. It's been a while, but I gotta say, it really feels good to be back in the studio and especially back to recording episodes of the podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I've been looking forward to it for some time because we have a lot of new things, a lot of changes since our last podcast.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a new year, new season. Here we are. And one of the things that's new that a lot of our returning listeners are going to recognize right away, new name.
A new name. That's right. We are now the Prediction Trade, no longer the Political Trade. And the reason for that was simple. We pretty much exhausted the political markets with the passing of the general election in November and then the Georgia Senate races that followed. And with less political inventory, but a lot more new things coming on the prediction market horizon in the form of new markets like Kalshi and increased visibility from Polymarket, and of course Predicted, always there and dependable for bringing us political trades. We thought we would extend our coverage to include essentially anything you can bet on. If you can bet on it, we'll talk about it on the Prediction Trade.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of the direction that we're taking the Prediction Trade column in Luckbox as well. I know we've been working with Good Judgment Project, and as part of that, we've had expert super forecasters weigh in, including the CEO of the company, Warren Hatch, has been writing for us and sharing a few tips of the trade about, well, how to be a better forecaster.
A lot to look forward to there. You've also got us on a new platform, right?
That's right. Starting with this season, we are now a Podcast One podcast. So just a few other names who are on that network that you might know: Shaquille O'Neal, Adam Carolla. So for those of you who may be listening through Podcast One for the first time, welcome, and I hope you're ready to make some money.
Oh, terrific. So you've been hanging with Shaq and Corolla
just in my free time, whenever I can.
In your free time. Well, what I'm most excited about, just because I think we were willingly entering into a death spiral of sorts, is a new theme song with our new name and our new season. But we stuck with death. It seems like we have a commitment to death.
Yeah, the death spiral continues, and the listeners heard a little bit of the new theme song at the top, but I'm going to play a little bit more right now. So that is just another taste of Where Do We Go From Here by Death. I got to tell you, Jeff, I had never heard of Death before you introduced them to me for this podcast, but I've grown into something of a fan.
Well, I know you're a jam band fan, self-proclaimed fish head, so that's quite a compliment. And if you have room to take on another band, but they're a fascinating story. Death is a punk rock band that was formed in early 70s, around 1971 in Detroit. And they're three brothers, and they're brothers in more than one way. They're three Black American brothers, Bobby, David, and Dennis, and the last name is Hackney. And they were first inspired. They started out as a funk band, and then their dad took them to a Who concert, and they decided they wanted to get into rock. And they changed their name to Death after their father passed away, somewhat as a tribute to him. And then they caught interest of Clive Davis, the president of Columbia Records, who actually paid for their recording session of the song that is now our theme song. But he wanted them to change their name from Death to something that was more commercially palatable. And they refused because originally it was a tribute to their father and his recent passing. So perhaps that's why they remained in obscurity. The interesting thing is they recorded 7 songs in that Clive Davis paid for recording session, but they only released a single, "Politicians in My Eyes," which was our theme song for the first season of The Political Trade. That's one of my top 10 favorite songs of all time because of the angst and the lyrics. It's very much like a System of a Down song, and the rest of the album was never recorded or never released. So the 500 copies of the original singles circulated among collectors for a while, and eventually that price went up to the thousands to get your hands on a copy of Politicians in My Eyes. And it wasn't discovered that there was a full recording session until 2009, which is when they released, with the son of Bobby Hackney's permission, the album for the whole world to see, which includes our theme song, "Where Do We Go From Here?"
Well, it's a great story, and, speaking of great stories, I think I know where we have to go from here. I think we should bring, James Altucher on.
All right, then let's introduce today's guest. And today, I'm really pleased to say we're joined by New Yorker James Altucher. James is an entrepreneur, angel investor, former hedge fund manager, and stand up comedian, and the author of several critically acclaimed books, including Choose Yourself, and recently released Skip the Line: The 10,000 Experiments Rule and Other Surprising Advice for Reaching Your Goals. He's the host of the James Altucher Show, the podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcast platform. James speaks about investing, about trends, politics, self improvement. And when he's not doing any of that, he's hard at work pissing off Jerry Seinfeld. So
Yeah.
you're a really busy guy, James. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I mean, I'm a big fan, and it's really just a pleasure to be here. We've been talking for a while and getting to know each other, and just happy to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. We actually spoke before the November elections, and we were planning to have you on the podcast back then. But we decided to save up for have you as our first guest on season 2. So it's great to have you in. So let's start. We're going to focus on the New York markets today, the markets that are on Predicted and Polymarket, two of the prediction betting platforms, and they both have what are probably the most active political trading markets right now, and that is the fate of Governor Andrew Cuomo, New York governor, and what lies ahead for New York City's mayor once de Blasio's 3 terms expire this year, and that mayoral race. So we're going to focus on that because you're a lifelong New Yorker, native New Yorker, and we know you have a lot of insights about New York. But let's start with that. You made some press not too long ago. You originally published a story on LinkedIn on April 13th, which was entitled "New York City is Dead Forever. Here's Why." And it existed on LinkedIn. I saw it there initially on LinkedIn. It was quite shared, of course. And then the New York Post picked it up about 4 days later. And do you want to summarize the article for us, or your op-ed?
Yeah, and I'm gonna summarize it by first addressing. I mean, a lot of the reaction among New Yorkers of my article was negative, and I think that was incorrect. Like, I love New York. Again, born and raised there. I've been there my entire adult life and a lot of my child life, and my children live there. And just I love New York City. I've 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 had successes in New York City. I've had massive failures in New York City. I've bounced back in New York City. It's just a part of my blood. And what disturbed me during the pandemic and the lockdowns was that I thought I was seeing more and more problems economically. And, there not only were my favorite restaurants closing, but many restaurants were closing. And I own a comedy club in New York City, so I'm part of the commercial scene there. And I talk to a lot of storefront owners and small business owners. And there was just a lot of economic problems, and not just among the owners of these businesses, but the employees. I mean, every employee was going unemployed when the business was going out of business. Not only that, 1 in 4 New Yorkers were not paying their rent. It's still the case that 1 in 4 New Yorkers have not paid rent in about a year. And so not only was there serious problems among people who are renting apartments, but the mom and pop landlords were going broke trying to handle, their income when they weren't getting any anymore. And so there were many, many things I addressed in this article, including the fact that companies were not officially saying this, but I was seeing more and more companies telling employees to go remote permanently. And everybody was saying, well, why would it be different than 2009 or 9/11? Well, I explained in the article, and my article was the first to mention this, but bandwidth is 10 times higher than it was now. Bandwidth now is 10 times higher than it was in 2009. So suddenly we can have meetings on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, and we never were able to do that before. So companies were simply more productive. Employees enjoyed it more. Sure, some missed the day to day in the office, but more, according to various polls, more than 50% preferred working remote. And of course, you could do some sort of hybrid. And companies were making more money by, cutting leases, and we already see it. Like office buildings in Midtown that are allowed to be up to 50% full are only about 5% full, even today. So, and this is a situation that's not going away. Everyone was saying, "Oh, when the vaccine's here, everything's going to be okay." Well, everything's not okay to the many stores and restaurants and businesses that have already closed. Like it's not okay for them. It's not, they're not coming back. Second, there's such a gap in the kind of revenues that New York City and New York State's going to make this year that we don't even know what will happen. For instance, when New York City ends up with 20 or 30% less revenues because of lower income taxes, sales taxes, and property taxes than they expected, they're going to have to cut all their services, garbage collectors, police, EMTs, teachers, and on, which creates sort of this death spiral down. With fewer services, that means higher crime, less healthcare, more garbage, on, and fewer people moving to the city, which creates less revenues the following year. So, which creates less services, which creates less people, and on. It's a death spiral.
Well,
And
it
so
doesn't sound as though you're recanting in any way, right? You're just reiterating
no, and not only
your
that,
yeah.
since the article came out, the data has gotten much worse. Everything I predicted has come true and then some. I mean, the budget shortfalls are much greater than we thought, and we haven't even seen. We don't even know what the tax receipts are going to be for 2020 because we'll know by the end of 2021. But and then we'll also further know by 2022 what happens in 2021 because there was such an exodus of people who have left. It's the greatest exodus out of New York City ever, percentage wise.
Mm.
And people say, "Oh, well, maybe it'll be great. It'll be back to the culture of the 70s." And people have this mythological view of what 1970s New York City was like, that oh, there was all these artists and it was great. It was not great in New York City in the 70s. I was a kid then and it was scary. I was mugged several times. It was the murder capital of the country, maybe the world. It was not pleasant, and it took 30 years to make a comeback. So I hope things don't go back to the 70s. I think, New York City was in good shape and it was getting better. And in 2019, and maybe you can argue gentrification, but that has pros and cons. I don't know. I was very concerned about New York City, and I've been on an active hunt still for solutions. And I've talked to mayoral candidates about this. I've talked to the Federal Reserve about this. I've talked to congressmen about this. I'm on the hunt for solutions. I'm not on the hunt for controversy.
Jerry Seinfeld's comments aside, what was the general response to your op-ed?
The general response was very positive because it's a serious issue. How are these metro cities going to survive and continue to lead America's success in the world going forward? I mean, New York City is the capital of the world in financially, and it's a very important city for New York for the United States. But the general response was very positive. Let's say 30 million people, give or take, have read the article, and I would argue 29 people liked it, and learned from it and understood it and agreed with it. But the 1 million people who hated it, primarily they were all in New York City, and they let me know it. And I got everything from death threats to I lost many friends. Friends of mine who defended me lost friends. Family members and ex-girlfriends wrote articles trashing me and just filled with lies about why I wrote this article. Nobody even I don't even think these people read the article. They just wanted an excuse to either ride the coattails of the article or they just wanted an excuse to trash me. And that very much disturbed me. Like I've had negative reactions to articles before. I don't try to be controversial, but I try to say new things. And I've never seen a response like this. And it really actually kind of disturbed me personally when I saw the not the reaction among the people I didn't know, but the reaction among
among
people
your
I did
friends.
know.
Understood.
And the reaction from Seinfeld. Like this was Jerry Seinfeld's first op-ed ever. And I don't he didn't need to trash me. We're on the same side, which is that we wanna help New York City, and I was actually there during the entire pandemic. He was not, and I just thought it was inappropriate, his response, rather than dealing with the actual issues.
Well, he called you a putz. I
Yeah, like some kinda 1930s, like, depression era insults, like, you would think he'd be a little more clever than that.
It's interesting that Seinfeld took up the cause, though, because it's true he doesn't live on, what is it, 129th West 81st, I think, is his Seinfeld apartment.
Yeah, and he's performed at my comedy club, like, a million times.
Right. No, he's at the Beresford on the Upper West Side. I remember I
Yeah.
used to live about a block away at 79th and Columbus years ago, and we used to call that the Barely Afford, but I know that's his building, the Beresford, at, on Central Park, right? Was he in New York when you wrote that, or is he in
No, no,
his Hampton?
I think he the entire time he's been living in the Hamptons. He hasn't I don't know if he's even been in New York City since.
Yeah, that's Billy Joel's, ex-house that he bought for 30 something million,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and I wondered, like, what, in which of the 100 rooms he was in that house, he was typing out his op-ed against me when, there's serious problems in New York City. I've during the pandemic, there were a lot of, churches and other organizations doing food lines, and I helped a little with those, and you would see there were people who were it was the lines were around the block. People were suffering, and sure, of course I hope New York survives. That's why I wrote the article, but there's problems right now, and people like Seinfeld could do a lot more to help out than just calling me a putz. So,
Well,
anyway.
there's real problems, and we've seen, move outs. We've seen, JetBlue announce that they're moving to Florida. We've seen Goldman Sachs, which is talking about opening up an office in Florida. Uh,
Goldman Sachs Asset Management is moving to Florida. I mean,
yes, right.
t over 100 financial firms, like big multi-billion dollar firms
Sure.
are moving to
Blackstone,
Florida.
Paul Singer, Paul Icahn,
Yeah,
or
and,
Carl Icahn, right?
when I wrote the article, all of these firms said, "There's no way we're leaving New York." They were kind of addressing, the backlash against my article, and 100% of them have left. And I've gotten actually a lot of apologies from people who have already moved to Florida, who originally told me weren't going to. And then all these billionaires were saying they were going to buy real estate in New York. None of them have bought anything. Billionaires are billionaires for a reason. They don't buy when things are still going down, and things are still going down. Yes, the high end of the market of New York is kind of staying afloat, but the mid to low end is straight down.
Well, it seems as though the response to is a proposed tax hike, right? I mean, didn't that, wasn't that just announced in terms of New York that
Yeah, New York State, and believe me, New York City. I've spoken to several mayoral candidates. New York City is going to have they're going to have creative solutions, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of creative people out there, and so taxes are the easiest thing. And one candidate even told me New Yorkers want to pay more taxes, and I was like, I don't think that's correct. Like there's a reason 500,000 people have left New York City in the past 6 months, and it's not because they wanna pay more taxes.
well, so despite receiving, about $10 billion or 100 billion in federal aid in the recent bailout, and there was 10 billion for education and a couple billion for rental assistance. In addition to that bailout in the COVID package, Cuomo still proposed raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers to a top rate of over 10.8%, right? So that's up from 8.8. So that's a
I mean,
2% increase. Yeah.
that's really hard. Like, New York State already had yeah, and New York State's IRS, I think they do a very good job. They're very aggressive about collecting, as they should be, but the taxes are very difficult there, and I think people took a look around during the pandemic and said, "Oh, if everything's going remote, or a lot of things are going remote, I could live wherever I want and be wherever I want and pay whatever I want in terms of taxes or lifestyle." And everyone always said, even 5 years ago, you wouldn't necessarily live in New York City if you didn't have to. And yes, there's a lot of cultural things happening in New York City, and New York City is an amazing city. It's the best city on the planet in many respects. But if you work really hard, the weather's not that great, the rents and the cost of living is exorbitant, the taxes are very high, and let's not forget an important thing here. Com Yes, the vaccine is important for solving COVID, but the vaccine is not gonna solve all the variants of COVID. There's other viruses, around the corner where we're gonna need new vaccines, and companies don't want we don't really know what the liability issues are yet on these things. So companies are not eager to have people come back to work, and you need that for New York City to have the sales taxes, the property taxes, the income taxes. I mean, it's a difficult
Sure.
economically, New York City, there right now, have thought of solutions, but they're not easy to implement, and they're not necessarily politically acceptable. It's gonna be a long time before New York City bounces back, and that's why it's very important who the next not only who the next mayor is, but who the next mayor is after that. It's important who the next governor is, and you're right, there's gonna be $100 billion bailout. And by the way, which is the very high end of what I thought it was going to be. I'm glad the bailout's that big. But that's the bailout New York State needs this year,
Right.
and they need much more than that in the long run.
Those combined taxes proposed by Cuomo would take the local income tax rate up to 14.7%, which would be the highest rate in the nation anywhere. And then you compare that to Florida at no state tax. You can understand the tax flight that's occurring there. But you made the transition for us. So what we're really here to talk about today is those markets, particularly the fate of New York's leadership, both at the city level with de Blasio and the upcoming mayoral race, and of course at the governor level. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to take a look at some New York themed prediction markets and tap into your expertise as a New Yorker to hopefully find some betting opportunities. We'll be right back. And we're back. But before we jump into the New York City markets, I want to remind listeners that we're talking about political prediction markets that you can wager real money on at predictit.org. If you're not already trading on Predictit, we have a $20 offer for you. Go to predictit.org/promo/TPT20. Sign up, deposit $20. We'll match the first $20 you deposited, and you'll have $40 to start trading with. All right, well, let's talk about Cuomo. So talk about things piling up on somebody and having a lot of political woes to deal with. So there's four major challenges that he's confronting right now. Obviously, the women coming forward with allegations of sexual harassment, among them two former aides, including Lindsey Boylan and Charlotte Bennett, who accused him last month as well. Letitia James, the attorney general, has opened an investigation. And of course, he's denied those allegations and has even gone further to say that he wouldn't resign.
I'm not going to resign. I work for the people of the state of New York. They elected me, and I'm going to serve the people of the state of New York. And by the way, we have a full plate. We have COVID, we have recovery, we have rebuilding, we have a teetering New York City. We have a terrible financial picture. We have to do vaccines. No, I'm going to do the job the people of the state elected me to do.
Okay, so that's.
By the way, a teetering New York City financially, like when his response to my article was New York City is better than ever and is going to come back better than ever. So what we're seeing here is a wag the dog on a state level. So let's deflect the serious allegations against him and and basically say we're at war, which it is, which is true. New York State is in an economic war right now, and and you know these are serious issues. We do need someone who's experienced with them. Cuomo, perhaps more experienced than anyone else. Whether he's done a good job or not, I say no, but he certainly has a lot of experience. Both, I mean, he helped his father when his father was governor. He was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Clinton. He's a third term governor with no term limits. I mean, this is a man who has more experience in New York State politics than anyone in history, and he knows that there's a problem here, and so he is trying to deflect the allegations against him to stay in office, and that's a technique that usually works.
Well, I find it interesting that the allegations of sexual harassment actually seem to have more weight right now than the nursing home issues. You know, first of all, 50% of New Yorkers in the most recent poll are still in favor of Cuomo staying in office and not resigning. But his own aide admitted to altering data on nursing home deaths during COVID, which understated data that has subsequently been upgraded from 9,200 deaths to 15,000 deaths. Initially, it was 3,000 deaths added or that were covered up, and now that number's up to 15,000 deaths in nursing homes, which of course were the direct result of his policy. Um, that seems to be the least important of the two issues right now, of the two we've discussed thus far. Is that your take as well?
Well, I do think the most serious issue is the nursing home deaths, where as a result of his policies, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Like, given the fact that uh, the the older you are, the more susceptible you are to dying from this virus, and we knew this from day one. I mean, this wasn't something we discovered later on. We knew this a year ago when the lockdowns first occurred. I mean, this a year ago last week was the 1 year anniversary of the lockdowns. But we knew right in the beginning that older people were more susceptible to dying from this virus than younger people. And that's not so obvious. Like with the flu, for instance, you tend to have more younger people die than older people. But with this, you have more older people die than younger people. But we knew this. And what do? You send older people straight out of the hospital back into an environment with other older people who they then infect, and many people died. But I'll play the devil's advocate also. To be fair, um, Cuomo was very serious about the lockdowns and using that as a strategy to stop the virus. It didn't necessarily work, but nobody knew what would work and what wouldn't. And Cuomo also, he can't you can't say the government is responsible for everything. Like, okay, you send these older people back to the nursing homes. Can't there be a little bit of quarantining in the nursing homes to protect people? I mean, you can't blame everything on him. He didn't necessarily know everything. He was dealing with many complicated issues. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I do
Sure.
think he should have thought about this and had a different strategy. We had. I mean, if being in New York City, there was many beds available for older people. There were aircraft carriers made available. There was the Javits Center made available for older people to stay, and these beds were unused throughout the pandemic. So he did have alternatives to sending them straight back into. I mean, he was basically aiming guided missiles at the nursing homes that ended up killing many people. Many people I know, their grandparents died because of this, and it's a horrible and it's a shame. So I wouldn't say necessarily he's def he's definitely this was not smart about this, but you can't 100% blame him. There's a lot of blame to go around, although the buck stops there at his office. And I think it's more of a shame how much credit he took for solving problems with the virus when New York State was the worst state in the United States in terms of the virus. So many of these nursing home deaths happened that could have been avoided. But again, how do we 100% blame him? It was a very complicated situation. The one thing I will give him credit from, and it reminds me of Giuliani in the days after 9/11, is that Cuomo was very good with his press conferences at keeping us all aware of what was happening, keeping us updated, keeping us calm. he made mistakes with the nursing homes, but you can't blame him for everything. Although I do blame him for that. Yes, you can make an argument. He didn't really know it was a new situation. We didn't really know what would happen in these nursing homes, but he does have to take responsibility, and the buck stops there. And yes, it's his fault, but he seems to be surviving that. More
Seems to be.
interesting,
On
yeah.
March 11th, the state assembly announced that it would open an impeachment investigation, but that there's no indication as to how that will resolve itself, and he might very well survive this.
Yeah, he'll survive that. There's no question in my mind he'll survive that because look, many people makes mistakes in very difficult times. In 9/11, did we do everything correctly? No, we did not, and no one got impeached. So there's many precedents of mistakes happening. You know, the fires in California this year were extreme. Was it Gavin Newsom's fault? Maybe. Was it global warming's fault? No, because you could see the border of the fires. They stopped right at the California border and didn't seem to go any further. So it's clearly there's something about California state policy that created those fires. Will Gavin Newsom get impeached? No, it's not even being brought up. So people make mistakes and they survive.
Well, you're a betting man. You are famous for your some of your prior big bets, and in fact, you're famous also for giving some money back. I recall reading about your drain of your bank account from 15 million down to 143 dollars, but that's a story for
Yeah.
another time. But
Unfortunately, I've been too much of a betting man in some cases, but that was an issue of money management and yes,
all right,
poor
well,
decision making.
I know you like the prediction markets because you and I have spoken this subject
Yes.
earlier the prior year. By the way, what's your fascination with the prediction markets?
Well, I very much believe that to understand a topic, look, I've been in I've been a professional investor for 20 years, and I've also been in the media and journalism world. I've written for the Financial Times, I've written for the Wall Street Journal. And so I know kind of both sides of, you know, kind of what it means to make predictions and what happens. And when it's important to have what's called skin in the game. Like if you think something's going to happen, trust me, if you even bet $1 on it, you're going to have much more vested interest in learning all of the issues involved. So I'll give you as an example. I wanted to learn more about Brexit for whatever reason. So I went on predicted.org and I made a bet on or one or two bets on Brexit. I knew nothing about Brexit, but once I had money involved, once I had skin in the game, I read every document I could find, all the agreements between, the UK and the EU, all the issues about Brexit between, our Northern Ireland, Scotland, the UK, and all the trade deals between the UK and all the countries in the EU. And it was very clear to me that every time they put a deadline on Brexit, it wasn't going to happen because what I'm trying to say is rather than go all into Brexit, I learned a huge amount, not by just writing an article about Brexit, but by actually having skin in the game, by having a bet on there. I learned maybe 10 times as much as if I was simply writing an article. So I would encourage everybody to use prediction markets. If you need to learn about something, make a bet because you're going to have a cognitive bias to learn as much as you can.
Well, we're going to make you make a bet. Let's walk into the prediction markets right now. Over at Predicted, there's a number of Andrew Cuomo markets. In fact, they're among the most actively traded markets on the site right now. So let's take a look at the first one. Will Andrew Cuomo resign before May 1st? That market now has 1.2 million shares traded. The yes is only 15 cents. The no is 85 cents, which of course is the equivalent to 85% as a projection. And that is, will Andrew Cuomo resign before May 1st? What's your call?
Right. So essentially, right now we're at April 1st in a week. So May 1st is just in 1 month, and the yes is
15 cents.
that does, to be honest, that does seem like a fair price. So I don't know. I'm you always have to ask what are the fair odds because anything can actually happen. But uh, let me think about this for a second. If you notice also, it's very important to look at the chart. Notice that in the past 30 days, this has been trending down. I mean, we reached a high of what looks like about 50 cents on March 12th
Right.
when the allegations first really were raging. They're going down. I would go with the trend here, and I would certainly bet on a no for at 85 cents because although I don't like to bet that, and that's not my strategy is to bet that high of a market. I would prefer if this was at 5 cents, I would bet yes, just because that's a 5 cents to win 100 cents is a reasonable bet on such a controversial issue. But I do think, if gun to head, I would bet the 85 cents on no, 85 cents to win 100 cents, risking 85 cents. I think that's a 20% return in about 40 days.
Sure.
So I think that's an incredible bet. And again, all of the comments from Joe Biden, from Cuomo, from New York State, including the trend here in the chart is that n- people think it's less and less likely that Cuomo will resign. Let's not forget, Cuomo is doing a strategy that has worked very well. There's been several types of strategies since 2018 on the Me Too aspects. The first strategy is to completely deny everything, like Harvey Weinstein strategy. That strategy does not work, and it just makes people angrier and angrier. It gets more and more allegations out there, and of course, when there's one, there's usually many, and that doesn't work. Another strategy used by people who are accused is to say, "Yes, this happened. I'm sorry, and I hope people forgive me." And that strategy does not work either. So Louis C.K. famously used that strategy, and he's still in the world of the canceled, even though he's released specials and so on, and he's been very successful. He lost everything. He lost all his TV shows. He lost his primetime access. He lost his acceptance as the world's best comedian. And so just simply saying yes, I did it, and I apologize. Nothing illegal happened, but it was inappropriate. That does not work either. But there is a middle strategy that has worked for people. And by the way, we're not saying what's right and what's wrong.
Hmm.
I'm not saying these are ethical strategies. We're just talking now in terms of betting and probabilities. There is a middle ground strategy. And by the way, Al Franken also admitted that he was inappropriate and he resigned his US Senate race when he was Me Too'd. I mean, his US Senate position. And y- that strategy did not work for him because A, he was forced to resign, and B, a lot of people even think now he shouldn't have resigned. Like they
Right.
think it was a mistake that he resigned. But that aside, there's a middle strategy that very few people have used that has worked. And I'm thinking specifically of James Franco was accused of was Me Too. He was accused of various sexual harassment issues. And he went on late night TV and he said, listen, I have a different story to tell. But I do think in this environment, it's very important for women to tell their story. And I think we should listen. And I think it's appropriate that women are able to express what happened to them without pushback. And so I'm here to listen. But I do have a different story to tell. And that's all I'll say on this. So he doesn't admit it. He doesn't deny it. He is supportive of women expressing stories, even if they're against him. And by the way, he there was never a mention again of him being Me Too. He survived it. And again, I'm not saying whether he was right or wrong or whether the women were right or wrong, but he survived it. Also, we do have context in the Democratic Party. Joe Biden was accused of rape by Tara Reid, and of course, he fully denied it, and he survived. So a lot of the discussion around and he did say that women should have a right to express their story. So that was part of his narrative as well. So you can't fully bring Cuomo down without dragging Biden into that a little bit, which, the Democratic Party is now circling around and protecting his own. Notice the biggest Me Too people on the woman who accused Harvey Weinstein all banded together when Tara Reid made her accusations, and they specifically said hashtag I believe her, but I'm voting for Biden.
Can't go
Sorry.
anywhere.
And so that kind of set a precedent that Me Too maybe didn't even take themselves as seriously when it affected one of their own. And so the same thing's happening with Cuomo right now. Nobody's accusing him of, rape or anything like that. Not that that makes it any better what's happening here, but we're a little hazy on what exactly happened and what constitutes sexual harassment. It seems like he certainly did things that were inappropriate for a governor, but he's saying the same thing. Let This is a time for women to speak. Let's let the impeachment investigation happen. Both Biden and Cuomo are saying, "I'll will abide by whatever the impeachment investigation happens." That's certainly not going to happen by May 1st. So this is an easy 85 cents, bet no and win 20%.
All right, so let's go to the more difficult market because there's a time premium involved, and that's Cuomo in office at the end of the year. Now, that has about 2.5 million shares traded. So you can see it's getting a lot of play, and it's pretty close to even money. It's at 47 cents for the yes for Cuomo to be in office at the end of the year. So it's a good payout. What's your call?
Coleman office, yeah, it's about even. So let's just say it's even. And the trend, by the way, has for that one also has been going. That one's going to be closely related to this May 1st one. The chart on that will be closely related because there are similar issues. Cuomo will certainly be in office by the end of the year because these issues are going to die down, and even an impeachment investigation will go on much longer than the end of the year. The end of the year is 8 months from now, and there's a lot of things that are going to be happening. First, we're going to have vaccine rollouts. We're going to have economic bailouts. We're going to have a lot of ways that Cuomo can shine for his constituents, even the ones that are on the fence with him. And you noted before that you know Cuomo's not doing horribly in the polls. Yes, there are less people like him now than a month ago, but he's held up fairly well. And now the only thing going against him is this impeachment investigation, which has to, of course, ramp up, start their research, publish results. That will take more than a year. That will certainly go longer than the end of the year. And until then, nothing's going to happen to him in office. Meanwhile, he only has upside. Like New York State is in such a disaster. He just got a bailout, so he's going to spend that money pretty liberally, and he's going to make that. He's going to make his constituents happy. He's going to certainly spend that money on his constituents, and uh, people tend to forget things. Unfortunately, there's going to be new news events. What's happening with Kim Kardashian and Kanye West? There's going to be new news events. There's going to be more people canceled, and people are going to forget about Cuomo. And he's got a base that supports him, and there's he's more people are going to support him when he gives them money, which is what's going to happen. So I think this is an easy bet. 50 cents. Yes, he is going to be in office January 1st, 2022. I have no doubt.
So, despite calls from Schumer, from Chris and Gillibrand, you think he survives this. That's your bet. So, let's move on to the
And by the way,
2022.
I can't stand Cuomo. The guy sent out an email to 10 million people trashing me inappropriately about an article which he now agrees with, according to his comments. So he was just trying to win favor by trashing me. And so I can't. I despise the man, and I despise what he did to these women, and I despise what he did in the nursing homes. Will he survive in office? Absolutely.
Say that. So that moves us to the Democratic gubernatorial nomination for governor, and that would be Letitia James is leading that market right now, the current attorney general at 37 cents. Then Kathy Hochul is second at 21 cent, and Andrew Cuomo comes in third at 18 cents. Do you have a call here? Are you following that closely?
Yeah. So look, Letitia James is riding high simply because it's the Elliot Spitzer slash Rudy Giuliani effect. If you're a successful prosecutor for the causes of your local area, you're going to win office. So Rudy Giuliani and Elliot Spitzer, both famous for cracking down on everything from Wall Street excess and mafia and all sorts of things that got them in the news every single day. People loved it. This is a law and order guy, and let's elect this person mayor or a governor or whatever. So they both won huge by being essentially playing the role of an attorney general. And Letitia James, she could make a name for herself here, being an attorney general against Cuomo. But so I think that's the bet there, and her name's been in the news lately. But again, this is an issue that's going to die down. And her findings are going to be interesting, but they're going to be buried. It's not like It's not like going after Wall Street. It's not like going after the mafia. It's going after a person who already is largely liked and who was even considered a hero last year. And so uh, uh, there's no way for Letitia James. There's no way for Andrew Cuomo either. That's not going to happen. AOC is interesting. I noticed she's here at three cents,
At
but
three
she's
cents.
not going to she's not going to take the chance when she's got such a lock on her congressional district. If she runs for governor and loses, it's going to affect her negatively, and she's young and she's got some years to marinate in Congress before she takes her next step. So I think next for her is, maybe in a presidential administration or two, something in along the lines of cabinet. She'll tone down some of her rhetoric and be more accepted by the center, but she needs to marinate a little more as well. Andrew Yang, he's going to be in only his first year as mayor. He's not going to jump from very poor. It would be sort of tone deaf to jump from mayor of New York to governor so quickly, particularly since mayor of New York is itself a launching pad for the presidency and higher office, and Yang knows that. So he's not going to risk it all by running for governor and potentially losing.
You're
So
buying you're
it,
buying you're buying a lot of no's in this market, but who's the yes bet? If it's no to Letitia James, no to Cuomo,
And
no to
and
Cortez,
I
and
don't see her on here. And by the way, Bill de Blasio is a joke for governor, so that's off. But Kristen Gillibrand is, in my view, she's at some point going to run and quickly go to the top of this, but her contract's not even here. So uh, I think it's a natural move to go from Senate to governor. She's been senator for something like 12 years. She was a congressman. Um, she needs executive experience. It's very important to have executive experience to whether you're going to eventually make a run for president or vice president um or even retire and become the executive chairman of Citigroup or whatever it is she does next. She needs executive experience, and being governor provides that. So I do think, again, if she was, if she, I wish she was here at even 1 cent, and I would bet on her. And by the way, it might not be because she's going to win,
right.
but if she is on here at 1 or 2 cents, I have confidence she will get to 5 to 10 cents. And then I would probably sell it. If I could buy her at 2 cents and sell at 10 cents and get a 400% return, that's it. That's what I would do. As far
It's a
as
great
anything
bet
here,
for one that's not on the market. What about Hochul, Kathy Hochul?
no, I don't see her having the name recognition. I don't see her or Letitia James and Kathy Hochul. I would also right now I would buy no on those. And Letitia James I would certainly buy no on. And Andrew Cuomo at 18 cents is a definite no.
So no's at the top of the ticket. We have Gillibrand if she shows up in this market. Those are actually fun bets for this.
Yeah, I don't know why Jill Brand's not on the market here. Maybe she's made some statements or something, but you never believe what politicians say if they're, whether or not they're going to run for office or not.
I think after this broadcast, you should be checking predicted. It may very well show up soon. We're going to take a really quick break. I want to come back for one more major market and talk about the New York City mayoral election. We'll be right back. All right, well, welcome back. We're with James Altucher, author, entrepreneur, stand-up comedian. By the way, stand-up comedian, how long have you had that comedy club in New York?
I've had the comedy club maybe 3 years. I've been doing stand up comedy about 7. And, the comedy club's right across the street from where I live in New York, or lived in New York. And, you know, it was, it was a pleasure it's still been a pleasure to be a part of it and still be a part of the New York City commercial scene. And I'm glad we've been really ahead of the game in terms of standing up for the rights of storefront owners.
It's a tough business comedy, right? I mean,
It
just
is a
being a
tough business. If
comedian.
you want to make money, do not invest in a comedy club. Trust me.
You
It
have
is not
you
a
have a
good
lot
business
of
to be in.
hobbies. Is that your biggest hobby is comedy or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even consider it like a hobby. Like I'm actually performing in Philadelphia this coming weekend and then Cleveland and Cincinnati and Kansas City. I take it pretty
That's not a
seriously,
hobby.
but
Yeah.
yeah, and right before the pandemic, I toured all over the Netherlands. The day we came back was the lockdowns. And but also at that level, I play very seriously the game of chess. So
Oh, that's
I'm
right. You are a chess player.
yeah.
What level chess player are you?
So I'm a nationally ranked chess master, and which is
20
you know,
2200, and that
yeah, 2200. I'm 2204 is my rating,
is that right?
and
That's
yeah.
wonderful. That's amazing. How often do you play?
Well, it's interesting. I've played every day for since I was about 17, but I've only studied the last time I studied seriously was in 1997. That was when I was my peak strength. So it was 24 years ago. But only recently, in the past 3 or 4 months, I think actually in reaction to my article about New York City, I decided to take a little break, and I decided to use the techniques in my book, Skip the Line, to get better at chess than I ever to actually get back to where I was at my peak, which was a long time ago. I lost a lot of skills not studying in 23 years, but to not only get back to that level, but to get stronger than I ever was. And so far, so good. 3 months later, I'm probably back to my old level, and now I'm aiming for I'm aiming for the gold.
It's a difficult thing to do. I recall years ago a story in the New York Times as to how the average performance by their chess rating of grandmasters began tipping over at the age of 43, which I always thought was so ironic because a game that's based on cumulative memory of strategies and scenarios that somehow that collective experience doesn't benefit you, but it just shows you how sharp your mind has to be as a chess player. I thought that was amazing. How old are you, by the way, James?
I'm 53, and so when I hit my peak around the age of 28, and I first was sort of master level or master strength when I was 17, and age does have an effect. I remember when
Sure.
I turned, and I didn't know that when I turned 40. So I'm 53. When I turned 40, it was kind of a little depressing, like, "Oh, it's too late to be a prodigy," which is obvious. But I figured, you know what? I'm gonna feel better. I'm gonna look at the top 100. I'm gonna look at the list of the top 100 chess players in the world, and I'm assuming there's a lot of older people on that because your image of chess is like, oh, it's a bunch of old people in suits with playing chess.
Yeah,
But only one person in the top 100 when I turned 40 was over 40. So even then, it was a young man's game, and now it's much younger.
it
I was just
is.
watching a video of Magnus Carlsen, who's the world chess champion.
Sure.
He's 29 years old, and even he was saying because he's older now, he's no longer young. He's not as fast as he once was, which is, oh my god, he's only 29
It's amazing.
and I'm 53. So
It's a great
we'll
game.
see.
What's your opening? What are you open?
Well, this is part of my techniques of learning, which is I played one opening for I played a set of very conservative openings for 30 years, and now in the past 3 months, I've 100% switched every single one of my openings to learn a much more combative, aggressive, trickier style, and so that's giving me a more holistic view of the game. And so now I play very extreme gambits and openings that are considered dubious, but learning them has given me a much deeper view of the entire game.
Like D4, C4, that kind of opening?
So no, D4 C4 is what I used to play, and that's very conservative actually, the Queen's Gambit. But now I'm playing things like there's a gambit called the Halloween Gambit. An opening that Magnus Carlsen plays actually called the Hillbilly Attack, and they're much more aggressive. And the Queen's Gambit is considered much more conservative.
There was a period of time when hedge funds were paying special attention to chess players and poker players as part of their recruiting because of the skills that they thought were essential to be a good investor, a good portfolio manager, or a good
Oh yeah,
trader.
I mean, chess has helped me get into college, graduate school, get me my first job, helped me raise money when I was running a hedge fund, helped me sell businesses. Because of the cultural mystique around chess, it's actually been very useful for my career, more useful for my career than my chess playing.
Well, let's see how it helps your prediction market wagering. So let's move
Yes.
into the New York City mayoral election. The incumbent, of course, is Bill de Blasio, and he's barred from running for a third term by term
Thank
limits.
God.
Thank God. Um,
Well, actually, not thank God, because there's no way he would win in the sense that, do you know what the turnout was in the last mayoral election? It was only 8%. And everyone always says, how does this guy keep getting elected? Most people did not vote for him. Most people just simply didn't vote. And now I think people realize the importance of local elections. There's going to be a lot higher turnout, and people like De Blasio won't get a free ride anymore just by showing up.
well, what's exciting about this this upcoming mayoral election is not only De Blasio's departure, but Andrew Yang entering the race. I'm going to have to stake a claim to this because in an issue of Luckbox magazine, in fact, our prediction issue that we put out last November, I made 20 predictions going forward into the year, and one of them was that he would run for mayor, and that's far in advance of him announcing any run. So I'm a little bit vested in Wang. I think you have a disclosure to make on this race too.
Yeah.
You're friends with Eric Adams, right?
So looking at the prediction markets, it's interesting. Number one and number two are Andrew Yang and Eric Adams. Andrew Yang, right before he announced for mayor, he was on my podcast. I know Andrew. I think, actually, I didn't really have a favorite in the primaries, but if I did, Andrew Yang was probably my favorite in the Democratic primaries. Once again, and I've written several articles about Andrew Yang. I've studied his issues, and so on. But Eric Adams is a very close friend of mine. Last year, right before the pandemic, he spent Thanksgiving at my house, and I've held fundraisers for him. I've donated money to his mayoral campaign. By the way, that does not influence who I want to win and who I think is going to win. He is a good friend, and I like Andrew's issues. And this has been very tough for me that the number one and number two candidates are friends of mine, and particularly Eric is good friend. Andrew's not good friend, but I know him, and I have been a fan of his. So
So,
here's
let me set that market for you just for a moment. So, 4.5 million shares traded in this predicted market. Yang is currently sitting at 60 cents. Who will be elected New York City mayor in 2021. Adams comes in second at 20 cents. And then there's McGuire, Stringer, and Wiley, each at 6 cents. And that's current pricing. So what say you?
Yeah. So there's a couple of interesting things. First off, Eric Adams, it should be noted, before the pandemic, he was clearly the front runner. This is a man he's the Brooklyn borough president. People don't realize this. If all the boroughs were cities, Brooklyn would be the third, I believe it would be the third largest city in the United States. There would be LA, then Chicago, then Brooklyn. Brooklyn is by itself, is an enormous city if it was a city. So, and the fact that Eric Adams won 92% of the vote when he became the Brooklyn borough president, he's got a strong constituency he's bringing along with him. I mean, Brooklyn's got 2.5 million people versus Manhattan with 1.6 million people. Yang is more popular in Manhattan, and Manhattan is, Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island are the smaller boroughs, and Brooklyn and Queens, which Eric Adams dominates, are the larger boroughs. Um, that said, Andrew Yang has his presidential name recognition, so it's an interesting battle. Now, if you'd asked me this before the pandemic, Eric Adams was a clear front runner. He had really good creative ideas about how to improve New York City, and that's why I'm a big admirer of him. He also, given the context of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, let's not forget that Eric Adams spent 24 years in the police force, so he's going to have the strong support of the police force, New York City all New York City employees, and Brooklyn, and people are going to look to Eric Adams to maybe soothe tensions if there's more of protests or even worse riots, which did occur during the Black Lives Matter protests. And by the way, you could listen to several podcasts I did with Eric Adams, as well as Andrew Yang. Eric also was involved in a book project that I've been working on with Charlemagne the God, who's a radio host in New
Sure,
York
of
City.
course.
And
You ain't black.
y well, because of that one line, Charlemagne and I, Charlemagne said to Biden, "We have questions," and that's when Joe Biden made his famous statement that he had to apologize for. But Charlemagne and I started working on an audiobook called "We Got Answers," and Eric Adams, at my invitation, participated in that, and so he, Eric came on my podcast after my article. So okay, putting all the context aside, I do think in today's environment, the most important issue facing New York City is economic. I mean, we do not want New York City. New York City is the financial capital of the US, if not the financial capital of the entire planet. We do not want New York City to fail economically. and simply raising taxes is not a solution. I think Eric Adams knows. I mean, let's just talk their strategies for a second. I think Eric Adams knows that he's outclassed by both Andrew Yang and Ray McGuire economically. He cannot compete on those levels with those guys. So his strategy has been to focus on, uh, the minority populations, low income housing, the issues that are very important to the poor in New York. And the poor is a greater part of the population than ever before because of these economic issues. So that's how he's attacking them, is rather than saying, hey, let's keep, New York City strong and powerful. He's saying, listen, there's millions of people suffering, particularly among minorities, and which is a natural constituency for Eric. He's African American, and he's aiming, everything he says is aimed towards that. I even once asked him directly, why are you doing this? Like, you have strong base among all the populations of New York. You're going to be looked at as almost too much to the left. And he's like, trust me, I know what I'm doing. And over the past year, I've seen his strategy, and look, he's still in second, despite the fact that he may not have as deep an understanding of the economic issues as some of the other candidates. But Andrew Yang, when I asked Andrew Yang, why did you run for president? His answer was a great answer, which is that there was a lack of supply in the market for ideas. I had new creative ideas and there was demand for them, and that's why I ran. And that's why an unknown like Andrew was able to attract such a passionate audience. I mean, more people wanted Andrew. If people listed their second choice for president, Andrew Yang was the second choice for
That's right.
everybody,
Yep.
because they were very passionate about him, and the Yang gang was an extremely passionate constituency. So ideas are important. And by the way, he might not have all the ideas yet for New York City, but he's extremely creative. He's already proposed a lot of creative ideas, which shows me that he is going to be creative and not just think about raising taxes. So again, this is not stating an opinion, but I think his creativity is going to come through. His presidential name recognition is going to come through. He learned a lot on the national audience, but Eric is a smooth politician, and Eric is a great politician. I mean, he gave a speech at a fundraiser in my apartment, and some very impressive people were wowed by his speech. Both Republicans and Democrats, wanted to spend time with him after his speech. He's a very good politician. But Andrew learned a lot. I do think this is a fair price for Andrew, 60 cents. Eric is probably underpriced at 20 cents. I think there's almost the problem is the election is in less than 2 months. It's June 22nd is the primary. Whoever wins the Democrat primary is going to win.
And ranked choice voting will be in play for the first time, which probably bodes very well for Yang.
Well, no, I think ranked choice voting bodes well for Eric because, again, Brooklyn might not come out to the polls the first time around, but if there's a second poll, they might say, hey, our guy is a potential. We better show up for the polls. So I don't think Eric's going to win. I think Andrew Yang's going to win, but I think Eric is a decent bet at 20 cents, selling maybe at 30 cents. But I don't know if I would make the bet. I think these are fair prices. I think Andrew Yang's going to win. And so perhaps the real bet, here's what I would do. I would bet both bets. I would bet on Andrew Yang at 60 cents, and I would bet on Eric Adams at 20 cents. I would sell Eric if he goes to 25 or 30 cents, and I'd ride Andrew Yang for the long run up to 100 cents. So that's my bets. So making two bets is a decent hedge. Now, the one thing about investing, about betting, and even about chess is mitigating risk. The rewards are clearly there. We know what the rewards are, but how you manage risk and how you do money management is the key to success in all of these areas, including on these prediction markets. So betting on Eric at 20 cents is a good hedge. But my ultimate bet is I do think Andrew Yang will win. I'm sorry, Eric. I love you. You're a great friend, and you've been there for me, and I've hopefully been there for you. And but I do think Andrew Yang is gonna rise to the top here, and also people want to vote for him because they want him as a candidate in 2024 or 2028 for the presidency.
Well, so that you combine Yang at 60 cents and Adams at 20. So if you put down 80 cents for that dollar return, that's a 25% return. But your point is that probably has a 90% or higher probability. So that's a value bet essentially if you can get a 95% probability for 80 cents.
Yeah, and I'd have to that's the sort of bet where before the primary, I might take off one or the other of the bets, but probably I would take off Eric. But then again, if it looks to me like we're gonna go into that Eric's gonna score well in ranked choice, I might even buy more Eric because this is sort of an ongoing thing because Eric's gonna spike up if the ranked choice gives him a strong showing. But if the bet was simply who's gonna be the next mayor, and you could only bet once, Andrew Yang at 60 cents would be my bet. But there's nuances here which make it an interesting betting market.
All right. Well, we're going to probably take you up on trying to get you back on before the general election to see how your predictions are panning out. But if we're going to New York races, a lifelong vocal New Yorker was our best source. So, James, it was great having you on. We really appreciate you joining us.
Oh my God, I appreciate it so much. I love this prediction market. The ideas of using prediction markets for decision making, and it's a game, it's a science, it's an art, it's investing, it's gambling, it's a way to manage risk, and I just love talking about these things.
Well, people can follow you, and they should. You're very active on Twitter at J Altucher, Altucher, and of course your
Yeah,
web.
or they could listen to my podcast, The James Altucher Show, or I have a TV series on Amazon Prime called Choose Yourself. I have a book that just came out, Skip the Line. I have another audiobook coming out called We Got Answers, and that's with Charlemagne. And yeah, I'm all over the place.
You are busy, so thanks for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Be well. Well, that wraps up today's episode. If you like what you heard, tell your friends about us and make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out thepredictiontrade.com to sign up for our newsletter. Find us on social media or send us a message. And you can also find the Prediction Trade in print in each issue of Luckbox magazine. Go to getluckbox.com/TPT to read the latest issue of Luckbox digitally for free. So thanks again for joining us. This is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
And remember to believe in math, master your trade, and join us next time on The Prediction Trade.